Okay. Well, once again, I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's presentation. We're going to spend about an hour, hour and a half talking about Grizzly Country. And what we're going to be doing is myself and a couple of my good friends and bear specialists are going to be joining us tonight to talk about this wonderful and amazing creature. So besides myself, I'm Daryl Radijek. I have Stephanie Payne along with me, Kim Titchener, and Tyler Brazington. And before we get started, I do want to preface this, that this class is about an amazing, beautiful, wonderful creature, but it can potentially be a creature that you might not want to run into and have a close encounter with. And so when we're here in this class, we're going to be teaching you all about bears, but there are some ground rules. Just so you know, it's only the instructors that are going to have their cameras and microphones enabled. And we do want you to ask questions. That's what we're here for. We want you to ask questions so we can answer them for you. If we're ever going along and there's really something that you need to interrupt, there is a feature on Zoom that you can raise your hand. Stephanie, can you explain that real quick, where that is found?
Exactly. So if you're on a desktop or a laptop computer, generally speaking, you might have to scroll to the bottom to make the thing prompt up, but there should be a bar across the bottom of it. In there, you'll actually see the one that Daryl's currently referring to. You'll have to click on the button that says reactions. And then there's an option immediately above that that says raise hand. So that's how you'll raise your hand if you need to address us. I will try to keep an eye on that to see who has their hand raised. Additionally, a few buttons to the left of that, you'll find your chat button. And if you want to go ahead and click on that whenever you want to engage in the chat, feel free to do that. And as I mentioned before, as Daryl mentioned before, I'll monitor that a bit and we'll bring up those questions as well.
Okay, thanks for that, Steph. But the most important thing for this particular slide is that we are going to teach about wildlife and about wildlife safety, but you have to understand wildlife are unpredictable. No matter how many times we see a behavior, a bear doing a certain thing, it can always be unpredictable. So under the terms and conditions of this, just taking this class does not guarantee anything because, like I said, wild animals are unpredictable. So if perchance a bear does something that you don't expect it to do, that's not our fault. That's a bear being a bear. So just understand that what we will be teaching you will be science-based. It'll be based on years and years and years of experience, but you can never guarantee anything with 100% certainty. So just understand that going into this class, but again, sit back and relax. I promise you're going to learn something. You're going to enjoy the class, and hopefully you'll be more confident hiking and recreating in Grizzly Country from here on out. But all right, so what I am going to do to get this class kicked off is tell you a little bit about the folks that are presenting this class. Most of you know me. I'm Daryl Radijek. I used to be the bear coordinator for the state of Tennessee, is also the chief of wildlife. Back in 2015, I moved out west. I always dreamed of living and working in the Rockies, and I've been out here since 2015. I have oodles and oodles of bear experience. My very first job out of college after receiving my degree was working for the Appalachian Bear Center. So I've spent years and years observing bears pretty much in a natural environment. So that is me. I'm going to be giving the main presentation, but I also have a couple of guests here that are wonderfully qualified as bear experts. So the next person will be Stephanie Payne. And Stephanie, if you'd like to introduce yourself, go right ahead.
Yep, sure. So quick bio, and some of you may have already seen me in some of these other courses as well. My wildlife biology specialty is actually in human wildlife dynamics. So focusing on those places where humans and animals come into conflict with each other is really where the forte of my education is. And then in addition to that, I also coordinate the Wildlife Human Attack Response Training, which is a training course for federal, state, and provincial agencies. And in the course of that, we train those agencies and the people how to respond to those severe and fatal wildlife human conflict moments. So thank you. I'll go ahead and, yep, next.
So knowing that today's class was going to be focusing on grizzlies, I wanted to bring in some grizzly specialists. So the first one I brought in is Tyler Brazington. Tyler, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Tyler. Currently working in Grand Teton National Park. I do EMS and SAR during the winter, but primarily work on the bear management team during the spring, going through the fall months. Been doing this going on my 6th season now. Spent a little time up in Yellowstone working with Eric Reinertson and Carrie Gunther, who's the head for Yellowstone's bear program. And then currently I work for Justin Schwabedessen, who's the new bear biologist for Grand Teton National Park. Worked a little bit with wildlife disease with USGS. I've had the opportunity to do some necropsies on bears. And then additionally to that, working on my master's at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyler. And last but not least, we have Kim Tishner. Kim, introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm from Alberta, Canada. I've lived in the Rocky Mountains here near Banff National Park for over 20 years. You can see beautiful Canmore. And I started my career working with grizzly and black bears in Banff National Park with about 4 million visitors a year who all want to get a selfie with a bear. So lots of fun, lots of human wildlife conflict to deal with, not just bears, but other species as well. And of course, we decided to, reintroduce bison as well. So things will get interesting in the next few years too with that. After working with Parks Canada in the park, I started an organization called Wild Smart, working on human wildlife conflict in the Bow Valley, and ran that charitable organization for almost 10 years. Educating the public, working with communities, and trying to gain funding from multiple agencies and government agencies and private industry to try to continue education and try to help people learn to live with these amazing animals. And then in 2012, I started my own consulting business called Bear Safety and More. And I travel around North America talking about grizzly bears, black bears, polar bears, helping large industry, tourism operators, forestry, construction, railway, oil and gas industry, and government agencies learn all about bear behavior, learn how to reduce conflicts. Recently, because of COVID, I had a little bit more time on my hands and decided to start another business, a social entrepreneurship called WreckSafeWithWildlife.com. And we have online courses about bear safety and bear spray training. And we're just trying to help recreationists to be safer when they're out there, since there's so many more of them out there these days, as I'm sure Tyler has been seeing when he goes to work.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. And just so you know, folks, given the four of us here, we've got over 60 years of experience working with bears and working with grizzlies. And so the information we're going to provide is probably going to be as strong information as you'll find anywhere else. So with that, I'm going to get underway, and we are going to start talking about grizzly bears. And right out of the gate, someone might be thinking, well, you're talking about grizzly bears. Well, what about brown bears? Well, how come we're not talking about brown bears? And the thing is, folks, we are. And so if you sat in on my 3 bears presentation last month, I went over this slide, but I'm going to show it to you again. So I apologize if you've seen it already. But when we're trying to draw the line between what's the difference between a grizzly bear or a brown bear, this photo on the left is what we would typically call a grizzly bear. And if you look at the scientific name of it, it is Ursus arctos. And then you got this big boy on the right, which many people would easily recognize that, oh, that's a big old brown bear. And guess what, folks? Its scientific name is also Ursus arctos. Now, the reason we have, these are the exact same species, grizzly, brown bear, doesn't matter what bear you're talking about, it is Ursus arctos. But the difference between the two, if you look at the bear on the left, is going to be, the difference is what kind of variety or subspecies they are. A lot of people talk about subspecies, and a lot of people get confused thinking they're completely different species. They're not. Typically, a subspecies is going to be just the same animal in a different geographic region. So this grizzly bear on the left, its variety or subspecies, you have Ursus arctos horribilis, which is the greatest subspecies name in the world. I love that name. The bear on the right, that big old brown bear, is Ursus arctos middendorfi. This is actually a picture of a Kodiak bear found on Kodiak Island. Like I said, they're the exact same species, but there's tremendous geographic differences between the two. And when it comes to these brown bears, the main difference is you look at the food source. The bear on the left, that grizzly bear, these are bears that are going to be found in the Rocky Mountains, interior North America. So all along that Rocky Mountain range. And those bears primarily are going to be eating a lot of vegetation. They'll be eating some carcasses. They'll be eating some elk calves, whatever meat they could find, but it's usually few and far between. So the main diet of that grizzly bear on the left is going to be a lot of vegetation that they're eating. Now that bear on the right, that Kodiak bear, you've all seen those Discovery Channel shows that show the brown bears feeding on those crazy heavy salmon runs. Those bears are eating so much protein, so much nutrients that they grow to tremendous size. And so although they're the exact same species from that interior Rocky Mountain all the way to the coastal Alaska, same species, because of those differences in the foods that they're eating, they grow to be tremendously different. So they could appear very different, even though they're the same species. So just so you know, an easy way to remember this, folks, is every grizzly bear is a brown bear, but not every brown bear is a grizzly. Those grizzlies are the ones that are in the interior of their continent along the Rocky Mountain, along the Rocky Mountain range. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this brown bear or grizzly bear range. Where do you find these bears? And again, I apologize. Some of these slides were in my 3 bears presentation last month, but if you were a human coming to the New World prior to any of the Europeans coming here, you would find brown bears pretty much all over the western half of North America. They were a dominant animal. They ranged all the way up from the northern tip of Alaska all the way down into Mexico, and pretty much most of everything east of the Mississippi River. But you know as well as I, us Eastern Europeans thought we could dominate and control and utilize everything. We started eliminating any animal that we perceived as competition. And so unfortunately, over a course of a couple hundred years, we reduced the brown bear or grizzly bear range to what you see here. And so you can see it's pretty much most of Alaska, a good part of the western portion of Canada, and that finger that drops down into that whole Montana, Idaho, Wyoming area. That's what we typically call the greater Yellowstone area. And this is where we find brown bears today. Now, if you look to see, or if you ask the question, how many brown bears are out there in North America? Our best estimate is anywhere between 50,000 to 80,000. So it's a pretty healthy population of what we call brown bears. But like I said before, grizzlies, where are those found? Remember, they're found along that North America, or the Rocky Mountain range, extending all the way from the western United States all the way up through Canada, all the way up into Alaska. But the best way to remember is they're the bears found more in the interior of the continent as opposed to those coastal brown bears. Now, I'm going to bring up something that's going to be important for this talk. I'm going to bring up black bears, because black bears are another species of bears found in North America, other than polar bears, but not many people are going to run into polar bears. The reason I'm bringing up black bears is if you look at their range prior to European settlement, they were found all over North America. Once again, European settlers kind of didn't like the competition, and they started killing out the black bears, and they were extirpated from a great portion of the range. And so now they're found mostly in this, pretty much all of Canada, or most of Canada. They're found in many, many states in the United States. Not as many or as there used to be, but you still find pockets of them everywhere. The reason I'm bringing this up is if you look at that black bear range and you insert the brown bear range over on top of it, you could see that they overlap. Pretty much wherever you find brown bears, you're going to find black bears. And it's really important. And the reason I want to have this discussion is when you encounter a bear, if you're in the West and you encounter a bear, you really ought to know what bear you're encountering, because their behaviors can be vastly different at times. And so I want to go over a little bit how to distinguish black bears from grizzlies. And there's 4 common traits that you look at. And so if you can see my pointer, hopefully you can see my pointer. One of the telltale things, if you're able to see the claws, black bears have these short, very curved claws, where brown bears or grizzlies have these long, almost whitish claws, much longer claws on a brown bear than on a black bear. Also, the face profile. On a black bear, you see a straight face, and on the brown bear, you have this dish profile. There's also a little bit of difference between the ears, where the black bears usually have more prominent ears, and the grizzlies and the brown bears, their ears kind of seem much smaller on their head. But a key one that a lot of people look for is the shoulder hump. You see on the brown bears, you see a very prominent shoulder hump, not so much on the black bears. And so there's actually a number of graphics that you'll see over and over again. You see these 4 things: the claws, the face profile, the ears, and the shoulder hump. And again, this is what they're talking about, the claws. And so you cannot take just one of those attributes and automatically call that bear what it is, because sometimes the way a black bear is standing, it could look like it has a shoulder hump. Sometimes the grizzly does not have the shoulder hump. And so you'll get good at it, but you got to look for all these features at once. Now, the one thing that always confused me, and I'll be the first, I'm pretty thick. I can't grasp things right away until I can figure out how to think about them in a proper way that my brain understands. And so I always heard about this face having this dished profile, and I didn't know what it meant. So I did a little graphic for you. When you look at the black bear, if you look from the tip of the nose all the way to the top of the forehead, it's relatively straight. It's flat. The brown bear, on the other hand, has this dish shape. It has this high zygomatic arch, which is nerd talk for it's got a big brow ridge. And so it forms a hump. It's not a smooth straight line like you see in the black bear. And I guess the best way to call it a dish profile in my mind is it has that indentation that a dish might have. And so that's one of the ways, that's one of the key features. If you see a bear in profile, that dish profile is really important. So going back to these things where you've got the shoulders, the ears, the face, and the front claws, what I'm going to do, I'm going to test you guys. So if you're on a computer, great. If you're on an iPad, don't worry about it. But I'm going to test you guys and show you some pictures, and you tell me if they are black bear or grizzly, because again, it's really important to know what bear you're dealing with. So you can jot your answers down in the chat box. I'll only leave it up for a few seconds, but all right, very first one. This is pretty darn easy. Obviously, most people are going to say, hey, it's a black bear because it's black. Well, it is a black bear, but for a number of other reasons besides being black. How about this animal here, black or grizzly? Good guess, Barb. Anyone else? Black, grizz. See, it's already kind of difficult. This bear appears to have a little bit of a shoulder hump, but this is actually a black bear. The profile is going to be really straight if you see it directly from the side. The overall body characteristics, the bad thing is you can't see the claws too well, but this is actually a cinnamon colored black bear. This one here, if you want to jump in, what would you guess this is? That is a grizzly. Very good. Believe it or not, these are going to get harder. What would you say this guy is? Very good, Lori. This is a black bear. Big prominent ears like that. Usually when you see these overpronounced ears exaggerated like that, that's a good bet that it's a black bear, but that's a brown colored black bear. Now remember, coloration is not a distinguishing feature because black bears could be black, brown, cinnamon, blonde. So you can't look at color alone. This bear shows a great profile. You could see the hump. You can see somewhat of that dish shape where his forehead drops down to his nose. It's not real prominent, it's fairly straight, but you can definitely see the hump. I think this might actually be the same bear, but a different profile. This again is a grizzly. What about this one? What do you think this is? This has some features of a black, but believe it or not, this is a grizzly. I'm hoping Tyler and Kim, I'm hoping you're guessing right. It's something that the more and more you see these bears, it just comes natural. Like there's something about it that you're like, oh, that's a black or that's a grizzly. How about this one here? This, yep, very good. This is a black bear. Body shape, you just see a lot more black bears with that big hind end with more narrow shoulders. Stephanie, did you have something?
No,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
This one, beautiful, beautiful bear. What would you guess this is? Yeah, and don't feel bad about getting anything wrong. These are very difficult. That was a black bear. This one kind of stumped me at first, and I was really leaning towards black bear for a while. And then if you look down and look at his claws, you can see these long 3-inch straight claws. So this is a grizzly. And then my most favorite picture of all, and I've argued this picture over and over and over again. Can anyone guess what this is? People stopped replying because Lori, I'm very good. Mary, awesome. Lynn, no, believe it or not, most people were guessing on the one Facebook page. Most people were guessing this was a grizzly. And I contacted the photographer. I said, do you have any other photos of this bear? Because everyone is saying, look at the hump. It's a grizzly. It's guaranteed grizzly. And he got a side profile. In the side profile, you can see the face, the very straight profile. This is a black bear. But like I said, the way they're standing, it can be a little tricky sometimes. Do not feel bad if you did not get them all right. I didn't get them all right the first time I saw them, but the more you see, the more you'll learn. So here's the big thing. Why this is a grizzly class. Why are we talking about black bears? Well, it's really important to know the difference. And what I did is right before this class, I remembered a couple slides I used about 5 years ago, because bear encounters and bear fatalities are continuing to happen. And so because I'm a scientist, I'm a nerd, I've got to throw at least one graph at you. And if you look at the number of fatalities by decade over the last 100 years or so, you look at black bears and you see that line, it's starting to increase exponentially. Then you could plot the number of fatalities by grizzlies. Same thing, it's starting to go up at a sharp rate. And if you combine those two to look at all bear fatalities, you can definitely see a sharp increase in the number of fatalities. Now, I feel bad because I just remembered the slide and I didn't have time to populate it with the 2010 information, but it will go up once I plot that. But the other thing I wanted to show you is that there's some interesting statistics between those fatalities between black bears and grizzlies. This number is not correct. There's actually been a few more because I haven't added the 2010s. But if you look, a number of fatalities, about 34% of them over the last 100 years, 34% of them have occurred just within the last 20 years. So you can see that exponential growth. But this is the thing that I wanted to point out the most. This is why I brought these slides in here, is if you look, 52% of all the bear fatalities are from grizzlies and 48% are from black bears. And so if you look at that statistic alone, it's like, oh, black bears and grizzlies are equally dangerous. I don't like to use the term dangerous, but they can be dangerous at times. And from that stat alone, it looks like, oh, it's 50-50. About half are from black, half are from brown bears. But the problem is you've got to look at the population of the bears. If you look across North America, there could be as many as 500 to 800,000 black bears and only 50,000 to 80,000 brown bears. So it's a 1 to 10 difference. And so there's only about a tenth of the number of brown bears out there, yet they're responsible for about half of the human fatalities. And so a couple other interesting things, if you look, 73% prior to, or all time, 73% of the fatalities were male and only 27% female. But since 2000, there's beginning to see a change there. You're seeing more and more females having these encounters with grizzlies. Anyone care to guess why? I won't wait too long. Well, it's pretty simple. It's because the bears finally figured out the females taste a whole lot better. No, I'm teasing. It's probably because more and more females are getting out there in the backcountry, and it's an awesome thing. We got to get more women, more kids, more people enjoying wildlife and seeing these animals. But the bottom line, folks, is bears can be a dangerous animal. And so you need to know your bears. You need to know what kind of bear you're dealing with, and you need to know a little bit about their biology and behavior. And so that's what I'm going to talk about for about 20 minutes, is a little bit about their biology and behavior. Now, my friend here, Stephanie Payne, who is the guru with the unfortunate side of things with these fatalities, she's got to step off here in a little bit. But does anyone have any questions regarding bear attacks before I bid her a good night? If not, I will keep on going.
Oh, I heard
Steve,
yes.
do you have a question?
Wait, I should say I read a yes, yeah. We'll give
All
Steve
right.
a minute here to type that question out. Daryl, did you have anything else you wanted to mention? I did for the that is a good point. Alaska is not on here, and Alaska is obviously a hotbed of activity with bears. So that is something that I'm sure Daryl's is just lacking on this map. I'm sure it probably rolled up to the overall statistics.
Yeah, I apologize. It's a piss poor map. It was pulled off Wikipedia just to give you an idea that they can happen anywhere, but it did not. They're not even exact pinpoints or anything like that. But I just want people to know that these attacks just don't occur in Alaska. Courtney Red, thank you for joining in. Courtney, her husband, Chris, was a swap student the very first year, but they recently moved to Alaska, and Courtney wanted to join in to hopefully calm her fears about living in Grizzly Country. So Courtney, sit back and relax. I think we'll be able to teach you a little bit about that.
Okay, so we've got a couple questions actually. So Scott, who beat Steven, so Steve, I will definitely get to your question in a second, but he asked if there's patterns to what activities those who are killed were involved in. So I will tell you, a lot of times it comes down to situational awareness and respecting the environment that you're in. There is no such thing as I can give you one answer of don't do this one thing and you'll forever be safe, because you have to look at every circumstance. You have bears that are more habituated than others. For example, you have people that maybe think that they're more secure in their outdoor knowledge than what they really are. So at the end of the day, the number one thing that we can always tell you is situational awareness. Know the environment that you're in. If it's springtime, know what berry crops you're near, because that might be a hotbed of activity. If you're out in like the greater Yellowstone ecosystem and you're out in the backcountry hiking, pay attention to the environment around you. If you see a bear actively following you, that's always a bad sign as well. So there's definitely, I recommend probably sitting in on one of the bear behavior classes where we really delve into some of that, and Daryl might get into it more even today. But a lot of times bears are going to give you they're going to give you signs. They're going to be talking to you, and they're going to be saying either back up and get away from me because you're making me nervous, you're in my space, or they're going to be saying that looks like a potential food source. But again, both cases, situational awareness is a huge, huge thing in there.
Hey,
Uh,
Stephanie, before you go on
yep.
to the next one, if I could address Scott's question, the one thing that is really interesting, Scott, when you're looking at patterns is when you're looking at fatalities, black bear fatalities are almost always, in fact, I think 99% of them are always predatory or offensive attacks. Rarely do black bears, rarely does a fatality result when a black bear is acting defensively. On the flip side, with grizzlies or brown bears, there unfortunately is a number of fatalities when they act defensively. And we're going to get into the reason why, because there's a tremendous size difference, behavioral difference. So there are patterns where black bear fatalities tend to be predatory attacks, where grizzlies can be defensive or predatory.
Okay, so on Steve's question, let's see, he mentioned that he's a black bear jumped at him when he took a flash photo, and he heard of another incident. Do bears react to flashes of lights aggressively? So, Daryl, do you want to address that?
Do you have any information on that stuff?
So I actually, Steve, was in the exact opposite. I had a close encounter that was about to be of the worst kind with a female black bear, and at one point I started just randomly flashing my camera, holding the shutter button down actually, so it would just flash and flash and flash, because at that point the bear spray was in the hand because I was waiting for her to get in distance, but nothing caused her to do that at first. So, you know, flashes, I don't know that I have any data saying that a flash photo spurs an incident, but if you're in a bear's space, anything that's unexpected, if that bear's already nervous and you're already close to the bear, then anything obviously can trigger them to react, because it's probably scary. Daryl, do you want to say more on that one?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head in the fact that there's not enough data where flashes were used to either provoke or prevent an attack. So we unfortunately cannot say one way or the other. We've seen both reactions where it instigated or it stopped. So nothing conclusive.
Yeah. And then Melissa asked a question about the study done by Herrero, suggesting, for those of you who don't know, Stephen Herrero is considered one of the world's leading, most knowledgeable on grizzlies and black bears, but primarily grizzlies or brown bears. But he suggested many bear attacks had something to do with people with their dogs. Dogs are definitely an exacerbating. They're a factor that can definitely make a situation worse. Bears and dogs genetically are pretty close cousins, but boy, do they love to hate each other. Bears and dogs naturally do not get along. And a lot of times, things that you'll see, if you've got a human who's out with their dog, and whether their dog is on leash or off leash, if the dog is off leash, it might go accidentally antagonize a bear, accidentally, I'll put that in air quotes, antagonize the bear. And then if the situation escalates, the dog's going to run back to its mom and dad, i.e. the parent humans, and that could definitely go bad. And then in addition to that, we've seen lots of instances where a person might just be out, I don't want to say lots, please do not take that the bad way. We have seen instances where somebody may be out walking their dog. The bear actually acted defensively and aggressively towards the dog, but the human being, and I would be just as much a person to do this, gets in the way of that because they want to save their dog. So bears and dogs, like I said, they don't get along, and they will oftentimes lead to a more
intense.
and a more intense reaction on probably all parts. But did you want to add more on that one, Daryl?
No, that was good. And Melissa, I think you're in the heart of it. You're up in the Pacific Northwest, where it's just getting more and more crowded, and more people want to take their dogs with them on a hike, which I'm never going to tell people not to do that, because I do it myself. But just and people need to understand, if they take their dog with them, they are asking for a more intense bear encounter if they do have one.
Yep.
So.
There are dogs that are specifically designed to be able, that probably would be less inclined to bring the bear back to you. Carillion bear dogs, Anatolians, for example. But again, a lot of times, number one, those dogs aren't trained for that unless they are specifically trained for that. And then number two, we humans have a tendency to anthropomorphize our pets as well. So I know my dog is one of the two breeds I just mentioned, and if a bear looks at him the wrong way, I'm jumping in between that, and it's going to end badly for me, even though the dog outweighs me. So
Okay, well, thank you for that. Great questions, folks. Stephanie, you can stay on as long as you want, or you could go to sleep. You could probably keep watching and I'll put you to sleep. So, because I'm getting into the fun part, we're getting into bear biology, because this is really important for understanding bear behavior and especially grizzly behavior. So I am a nerd and we are going to talk about this whether or not you like it or not. So first thing I want to talk about with grizzlies, we're going to talk about how much they weigh, but one key point, and we're going to get back to this, they're typically bigger than black bears. And so if you look at a grizzly or a brown bear, same thing, males tend to go 400 pounds all the way up to 1,400 pounds. Now understand, the reason that weight variation is so high is those grizzlies, those interior bears, the ones that are in Yellowstone and in the Rockies, they tend to be towards the lower end of that. And then you get all the way up to the coastal Alaskan brown bears. Those are the ones pushing the 1,400. A grizzly, for the most part, that you might run into at Yellowstone or the Tetons, it's going to weigh in the lower realm, that 400 to 600 pounds. Females are smaller than the males. They'll only go 300. Really big female grizzly will be about 700 pounds. So understand that's a lot bigger than black bears. Black bears tend to be, the females only about 200 pounds, the males in that 300 to 400 pound weight. So much bigger than black bears typically. And so these are average looking grizzly. This is a little bit bigger grizzly. This is a really good size one for the Yellowstone or the Teton areas. In fact, that's where this photo is taken. This is one of those Alaskan brown bears. You can see the gut on it because they're feeding on that high rich food source. And you already saw this picture of the Kodiak bear. But for the most part, standard male and female grizzly going to be in that 400 to 600 pound weight, but pretty good sized bear, about 2 or 3 times bigger than a human on average. Now, when you look at the height, again, the key here is they're typically bigger than black bears. Black bears tend to only be about the size of a fully grown adult male. Obviously, they can get a little bit bigger than that, but grizzlies, on the other hand, or brown bears, they can be anywhere from 6 to 9 feet tall when they stand on their back legs. It's a big, intimidating animal. And so you have to understand the key point here is that grizzlies tend to be a whole lot bigger than us, but they're also a whole lot bigger than black bears on average. Now, what do bears eat? What do grizzlies eat? Well, their diet, for the most part, they're omnivorous, especially those interior bears, the ones you find Yellowstone, Tetons, all through the Rockies. Huge part of their diet is going to be vegetable matter. They're eating berries, they're eating grasses, they're eating acorns, they're eating insects. You don't get a lot of that meat eating. They'll be eating meat when they come out of the den, when they find carcasses of animals that did not survive a harsh winter. They'll feed on those carcasses. Yes, they will kill an animal if they can catch it. The problem is most animals, adult animals especially, are pretty fast and can run away from the bears, but they will kill an animal if they can get their hands on it. You all have probably seen videos of bears taking on a moose or a bison or an elk or a bison or anything like that. For the most part, their meat consumption comes from consuming carcasses or the calves when they're first born. A lot of their meat also comes from the insects that they eat. The main reason, or one of the things you have to understand, and again, I argue this point all the time, bears hibernate. Black bears, brown bears, bears hibernate. We call them super sleepers. They do it a little bit differently than some of the animals that we consider true hibernators. But when bears hibernate, they enter their den. They're not going to come out for weeks or months on end. They'll form this fecal plug where they're not defecating. So for literally, depending on the latitude that you find them, they are going to not be eating for anywhere from, say, the southernmost latitude from a month or 2, all the way up to 4 or 5, sometimes even close to 6 months in those far northern reaches. So they're not eating for a long time. So guess what happens when they come out of their den? They're eating. The bears are always eating. That is what bears do. Doesn't matter if it's a black bear or a brown bear, they want to eat. And that's what every single day they're trying to find something to eat, because when they emerge from the den, oftentimes those bears have lost anywhere from 20 to 30% of their body weight. And so they're starving. So in the springtime, they're looking for anything that they could find, trying to replace all that weight that they lost. Summertime, they kind of relax a little bit. It's the breeding season. They kind of have fun there. But then it quickly changes to that fall period, and they enter this phase called hyperphagia, where it's literally defined in Greek as a feeding frenzy. And so what they're doing is they're trying to pack on pounds. They're trying to pack on extra weight in order to hibernate again. And so from spring to summer to fall, they're always eating. They're always hungry. And this dictates their behavior because they're always looking for food. So since they're always looking for food, how do they find the food? And I've written articles. I talk about this all the time. I won't go into too much detail today, but they have this nose, this glorious nose that is just absolutely remarkable when it comes to their ability to smell things. Now, why do bears have such a strong sense of smell? It's built into their biology. If you look at a skull, this is a black bear skull, it's not a grizzly skull, but if you look at their skull, typical carnivore skull, but you turn and look straight on, and man, look at that. Look at the inside of that nasal cavity and how it's lined with all those little orifices where these smell receptors can live in there. And so those smell receptors, I'm going to use a fancy word, are also called olfactory receptors. They're obviously what mammals use to detect different smells. If you look at the inside of the bear's nasal cavity, and you can do cross sections, and you can see those cavernous areas that are just all throughout that nasal cavity that have a direct link. They're filled with these olfactory receptors that then have a direct link to that bear's brain. And so it is believed that the bears have the strongest sense of smell of all mammals. And if you think how strong that sense of smell is, there's the bear's nasal cavity and where the olfactory receptors reside. And there's the human nasal cavity. And we just have a couple of little gangly, I don't even know what they're called, but you can tell it's nowhere near as intricate as a bear's nasal cavity. So what does this equate? How does this relate to them? Well, we're all humans on this call. We all know what we can smell. So we'll consider us the baseline. And if you compare the number of olfactory receptors that we have, and if you look at a dog, in fact, let's even look at a bloodhound, which is the dog with the strongest sense of smell, they have about 300 times more olfactory receptors or smell receptors than we have. The crazy thing with bears, doesn't matter if it's a black bear or a grizzly, they have about 7 times more smell receptors than a bloodhound. And we all know how good bloodhounds can smell. And so if you do the math there, they can smell over 2,000 times better than us. I know it's a mind blown. It's hard to grasp, understand what that means. If you've seen my other bear presentations, I do that analogy of smell the beans and how powerful a bear can smell. It's just truly amazing how good they can locate food. So that is going to lead us into talking a little bit about a grizzly's temperament, because remember, they're always looking for food. That's what they're built to do. Hopefully this will relax some of you, Courtney. Generally, grizzlies are very wary of humans. They don't like being around people. They don't want to encounter people. They just want to be amongst their own kind. They don't like human encounters. One of the things that this leads to, now understanding what I just described with their size and everything, we often picture, or we can imagine grizzlies or these brown bears being kind of aloof and standoffish. Now, I don't mean that in any derogatory way in that they're stupid and bad tempered. What I mean by that, when I say aloof and standoffish, remember everything I just taught you about how big they are. They could be 600 pounds. They could be really big animals, 3 times bigger than a human. They're because they're so big, when they encounter a human, if there was an adult male walking and you have an adult male human that weighs 200 pounds and they run into, say, a female black bear, which weighs maybe 200 pounds, those two bears are about even, or those two animals are about evenly matched. They're about the same size. And so black bears are typically very skittish. They don't like encountering humans. They're going to run off in almost every situation. Now you take that 200-pound human and you walk up upon a male grizzly that might weigh 500, 600 pounds. That grizzly is not as afraid of humans. They don't like being around humans, but they don't care. It's like, it's a measly little human. And so when I say aloof, it means they're not as threatened by a human when they encounter them in the wild. Now, the standoffish does have a little bit of ill temper weaved in there because they're a much bigger animal than the human. They don't get afraid of as readily, and they don't back down as readily as a black bear would. And so these grizzlies are a much different animal than black bears. They tend to be a little bit more bold and can cause quite a stir in you when you encounter one, and they don't immediately run away. But that temperament is dictated a lot by their size and where they are in the pecking order of being out on that landscape. They are one of the dominant animals out there, if not the dominant animal. So the one thing to remember, the grizzlies, they're much bigger animals. They love their offspring. They will defend their offspring, and they're very, very protective of their offspring. And this is a real key point because we're going to talk about what to do in case you have a close encounter. So let's run through that. And before we dive in here, and I mentioned close encounters, I do want people to understand what an encounter is. And if you've been in my past classes, I always explain this. An encounter is not when you pull off the side of the road, you pull out your binoculars and you look at a bear 300 yards away in the field and the bear's feeding on berries. That's not an encounter. That's a sighting, but it's not an encounter. An encounter is when you are so close to that animal that your presence is going to change their behavior. They're going to react to you, you're going to react to them. And so that's what we're going to be talking about here with these close encounters. Now, there's certain close encounters, if you're in grizzly country, you got to be very mindful of. For example, the first thing you don't want to do in grizzly country is to surprise a grizzly at close range. If you are walking in a very dense area, please make sure you're making a lot of noise so you don't turn the corner and suddenly there's a grizzly at 10 feet away. That's a bad thing. That's a bad encounter. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. The next thing you don't want to do is get too close to a grizzly that is on a kill or another one of its food sources. And so obviously discovering a carcass in the backcountry, especially in grizzly country, you've got to have your head on a swivel because you don't want to upset that bear because you're too close to its food source. Another situation is, I mentioned it before, a female with cubs, doesn't matter if it's a grizzly or a black bear, they're very defensive of their cubs. Obviously, that's going to elicit a reaction in that bear. Another one, mating season. This isn't all too happen. It only occurs for about 4 to 6 weeks in the summertime. But if you get in between a male and a female grizzly during the mating season, the male or the female might not like your presence too much. But last but not least, and we mentioned this, there's a great question by Melissa, and we kind of addressed this, but more and more people are going into the front country and to the back country with their dogs. especially if those dogs are off leash. That could lead to a close encounter because that bear gets agitated because of that dog's presence. Now, the reason I'm lumping all of these together is because every situation I just showed you is going to elicit a defensive response in a bear. And so what I mean by defensive is you're in their personal space. They don't want you around. For example, when you surprise them at close range, you're too close to them. They want you out of their personal space. Or you're too close to their food, or you're too close to their offspring, or you're too close to their mate, or they don't want that dog around. In all those situations, a bear typically reacts defensively. Now, can a grizzly act, or any other bear, can they act offensively? And unfortunately, they can. And when that occurs, when a bear acts offensively, usually it's a couple of things. They're seeking a food reward. They smell something they like. Remember, they're always hungry. They're always looking for food. They smell something they like and they want to investigate. It could be something in your pack or an aroma, or it might not have anything to do with you. You could go to a backcountry campsite and you could be perfectly clean, have no food smells, no whatever, but the person before you left a dirty camp. And so what's happening is the bear is coming in seeking some kind of food reward. That's an offensive situation. Probably the most dangerous one of all, and I hate mentioning it because it's so rare, but it is also probably the most dangerous case, is when the bear is actually seeking you as that food source. It is extremely rare, but it does occasionally happen. And so you have to know the difference between, all right, is this bear encounter, is this a defensive encounter where I'm too close? Or is this an offensive encounter where he wants to get closer? And so we're going to talk a little bit about reading body posture, and I'm going to do some videos and let Tyler and Kim jump in here with some of their experiences. But the first thing you need to do if you have an encounter with a bear, especially with a grizzly, is you always got to be prepared. Stephanie mentioned situational awareness. And so you kind of have to know what situation you're in. So the first thing, it's real easy. You want to know right off the bat, is this a defensive situation or an offensive situation? Now, in that defensive situation, remember, the bear's intention is to increase the distance between you and them. You're either in their space, you're too close to their food, you're too close to their offspring. They want you to get away. And so when that happens, the bear is typically going to put on a show. He's going to try to communicate with you to say, you're too close to me, get out of my space. And when they do this, they're often going to be kind of blustery and loud. They're going to be making noises. They're going to be doing body displays. They're trying to tell you, get out of my space. And so that bear is going to be talking to you, trying to get you to back off. That's a defensive situation. That is the vast, vast, vast majority of bear encounters where the bear wants you away from them. Now, in that offensive situation, which is extremely rare, but you have to be able to recognize it, the bear's intention is to decrease the distance between you and them. They want to get closer to you. And so in this situation, in an offensive situation, a bear is going to try to be sneaky. They're often going to be quiet. They're going to be kind of timid, almost acting a little bit curious, but they're not going to be making a lot of noise. They're just trying to get closer to you to see if there's this food reward. And when the bear does that, that's where you get loud and you got to scare that bear away. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what you do and how you react. But when it comes to the bear behaviors between these two situations, the defensive and offensive, let's talk first about the defensive situation. Remember, the bear wants you gone. The bear wants to tell you, hey, I'm upset or I'm nervous because you're too darn close to me. I need you to back up. And so they're going to do some certain behaviors. The first thing they might do is what we call jaw popping. And if you're close enough to the bear, you can hear it. Black bears do this all the time. Grizzlies will do it as well, but they'll take their jaws and and they'll smack their lips together back and forth, and you'll hear their lips smacking. That's what we call jaw popping. If you are too close, you can definitely hear this. Another thing they might do is they might huff at you. And what it is a quick exhalation of the air in their lungs. They'll go, and again, you could hear it. If you're close enough, you're going to hear this huffing. Again, that bear is telling you, I'm upset. I'm nervous with you being too close to me. Another thing that happens, and this is especially true with black bears, but it will happen in grizzlies, is their face becomes animated. Sometimes they lose facial control. And it's funny because these are so often misinterpreted. Sometimes the bear may begin to salivate because he's really nervous, and people will see a bear salivating. Oh my God, he wants to eat me. When in actuality, it's, oh my God, he wants me to get out of here. Another thing that might happen is they might yawn. Can you imagine being close to a bear and it yawns? Immediately people are comforted and they're calm. Oh, the bear's calm. He's tired. And that's the bear's just really getting upset, and they lose that facial control and they might yawn. So just understand that when a bear's face starts to twitch and become animated, that is when they are becoming really nervous that you're around. Another thing that grizzlies do, especially before you even get too close, if you're walking into an area and all of a sudden you see a grizzly stand up, a lot of people get immediately paranoid. Oh my gosh, this bear is going to attack me. Standing is generally when a bear doesn't see you and he knows something's in his space, but he can't see it, and they'll stand up. That is a bear just trying to figure out who's coming too close because he doesn't like it. And so in all these situations, the bear is getting upset or nervous. Now, if you don't immediately leave that area, he's then going to tell you forcefully to back up. Now you're pissing him off. And so what they might do is a bluff or a full-on charge. And I could not imagine being charged by a grizzly because it's got to be the most terrifying thing. But that's their reaction to you being in their space. Another thing they might do, and again, black bears do this, but grizzlies can do the same. They'll beat something up. If there's a bush or a log, they're putting on a forceful display to say, if you don't leave me alone, this is going to be you. And so these are some of the behaviors you'll see in a defensive situation. Again, really showy, vocal, loud. The bear's trying to speak with you, telling you to get away from him. Now, on that offensive side of thing, again, it's very rare that this occurs, but when it does, you got to be able to recognize it, because what that bear's telling you is he's hungry, he smells something, potential food. And so they might go into this stalking mode. Jared just asked me a question, if I've ever been charged by a black bear. Yes, that's a whole different story, but let me get through this first, and then we'll take a whole bunch of questions. One other thing besides the stalking is if you notice you're being followed by a bear, there's a good chance the bear is simply going in the same direction as you. Where you should really become nervous, or at least let your spidey senses start tingling, is if you change course and go down a different trail and the bear changes course, then you know that the bear is interested in you. So that constant pursuit. Another thing you'll notice when a bear is acting offensively, they're really quiet. They're not making any noise. They'll keep their head down low, might sway back and forth, but it's kind of like just that predatory behavior where they kind of don't want to let you out of their eyesight. Their eyes will remain locked on you. And so if you see a bear doing that, understand it's in offensive mode. If you see a bear acting all blustery and everything, it's in defensive mode. Why is this so important? Because this dictates how you are to react to them. So in this defensive situation, especially with a grizzly, you encounter a bear where they're close enough that you change their behavior, get your bear spray ready. Even if you don't even see the bear, if you sense something, if you see a carcass, or if your spidey senses are going off, get your bear spray ready. This is a critical piece of advice when you're in grizzly country. The main thing is, if you encounter a grizzly that's on a carcass or with cubs, do not pose as a threat. Don't go in there thinking you're going to scare him away, because Like I said, he's a whole lot bigger than you in most situations. What you want to do, you got to get yourself out of there. So you want to slowly back away. You never run. Obviously, that can trigger a chase instinct. If the bear starts coming at you, shout at it. Shout softly. You got to talk to the bear. You got to try to get him to stop. Use whatever voice that works. Whether or not you shout softly, shout loudly, whatever voice will get that bear to stop is what you're trying to find. Now, I will tell you one instance. I saw a video once where a woman, she encountered a black bear and she was completely terrified. Understandable. If you don't have experience, any bear will terrify you. And she tried to scare the bear away by screaming, but she was so nervous. Her screaming was so high pitched, it sounded like a fawn in distress. And the more she screamed, the bear, you could see it cocking its head, thinking, thinking it's a wounded animal. And so you got to find that voice deep within you to get that bear to stop if they're coming towards you. Now, remember, they want you out. And in most situations, they're going to let you get out of there because they just don't want you around. Now, if you are charged by a grizzly, you got to be ready to deploy that bear spray when he's in range. And I'm going to have Kim talk a little bit about that. And if that grizzly contacts you, you curl up, you cover the back of your neck, you try to stay on your stomach at all time and start praying and try to stay quiet. Your best hope is that they're just trying to eliminate the threat that they perceive, whether or not it's to their offspring or they think you're trying to steal a carcass. You're just hoping that they're going to go away. You don't fight back with a grizzly because you're going to lose. So what happens if you encounter a grizzly in an offensive situation? You're walking, this bear keeps following you. Again, first thing, get that bear spray ready. You got to be ready to use it too. You don't want to pose as a meal. So if he's pursuing you, you want him to back down to get away from you. So don't just lay down and roll over and act like a big old taco on the ground. Again, you got to get yourself out of that situation. You got to try to slowly back away to find some type of safe place for you to go. If the bear comes out, this is where you're shouting, you're screaming, you're trying to act the bigger bear, even though you probably won't be, but you're trying to act dominant to scare him off from an impending attack. If charged, once again, deploy your bear spray. And again, you're not going to beat up a grizzly. So if contact occurs, drop down, curl up, cover your head, try to stay on your stomach and start praying again, because you're hoping that he gets disinterested in you. If you could get that bear spray loose, by all means do it. So at this point, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to let Kim Titchener talk a little bit about bear spray and tell a story or two if she likes.
Well, it won't let me put my video back on. I shouldn't have done that.
Well,
you might be able to figure it out, but.
Okay, well, I can activate your microphone, but I can't activate your camera, so.
Oh, well, sorry about that. I must have pressed a silly button. All right, so bear spray. Really glad this stuff was invented. Because, you know, before bear spray was invented, we had a couple options. We had lie down, play dead. We had fight back. And of course, in both cases, you're in a situation where you can get injured and you can obviously, you can die. And so when bear spray was invented, all of a sudden we had this other option for what to do if a bear is either moving slowly towards us or running towards us. If you panic and you're like, I don't remember what Daryl said, is it defensive? Is it offensive? What do I do? You've got this spray that sprays long distance, and it's like a big fan shape. So as it comes out, the cloud gets bigger and bigger, and it becomes this like wall between you and the bear. It's orange, it's got hot peppers in it. And if you take a look at your can of bear spray, and this will be your homework tonight after this class, is go find your can of bear spray and have a look at the side of it, and it will tell you how many feet it sprays for those of you in the US. Most cans spray about 18 feet, and there are some companies that have cans that spray all the way up to 40 feet, which is pretty amazing. And most cans spray about 6 to 8 seconds, and some cans, you can get larger size cans, and those spray a little bit longer than that. So have a look at your can, see how far it sprays, how many seconds of spray you have in one of those cans. And also look at the expiry date on your can and ensure that you aren't walking around with a can from the 1990s. That won't go too well for you. A recent study was published in 2020 by Dr. Tom Smith and a group of biologists in the US that actually discovered that by weighing cans of bear spray from brand new all the way to 18 years of age, that after 4 years, those cans started to weigh less, which means they were depressurizing. So we want to make sure that you guys are walking around with bear spray that actually works when you're out there. The other thing that I strongly suggest when it comes to carrying bear spray is to actually have it on you physically. If it is in your backpack, you're never going to get out in time. If your bear spray is in a water bottle holder, like on the side of your pack, it could fall out. We had a case here in Canada and British Columbia a few years ago where a guy, he was making noise on the trail, riding his mountain bike, and as he was biking down the mountain, his bear spray fell out of the pocket of his bear spray, and he ran into a grizzly bear on the trail, and he didn't have any bear spray with him. So, which is really unfortunate. He ended up getting quite badly injured, but did survive. So holsters are good. There's ones that you can wear around with your belt that can go into a holster around your waist. A lot of people wear those. I don't personally wear a lot of belts. So I like scat belts. If you ever get a chance to look up scat belt online, they actually go over top of your clothes or over top of your jacket and just clasp closed. If I'm out fishing or on a quad, I can wear it across my chest. If you're out trail running or mountain biking, it fits really snug around your waist and sits right. For some people, they like it right at the back of their back there in the small of their back. I personally wear mine around the front. The other thing I'd say with bear spray is how important it is to practice pulling it out. So many of us actually carry bear spray, but not many of us have actually sprayed a can. And in some cases, people are like, how would you even how do you get the safety off, right? So it's really important to actually get your can out, have a look at it, make sure there isn't a zip tie shipping label stuck to it so that you can't actually use it. And pull that safety off, and so you can actually see that there's actually a clip underneath you can press down on, and that's where you're gonna use to spray. You're gonna aim downwards towards the bear's face if they're in close range of you, and give them a spray. And if they keep coming, you're gonna spray them again. If they keep coming, spray them again. A lot of the cases, tend to be close range, right? We're out in the bush. We're in thick forested habitat, and we come around a corner and we surprise a grizzly at close range. And so we're usually within the range of the use of that bear spray. So you're effectively going to be aiming and probably getting that bear with quite a bit of spray when you do shoot them with it. And if you're dealing with a bear that is predatory and that's following you, stalking you, they're probably going to be getting pretty close range before, in a lot of cases, people won't even realize the bear's there until they're quite close, like 16 feet or less. As some studies have shown. So highly effective product. There was a study done out of Alaska a few years ago looking at cases where people used bear spray and they were out hiking or hunting, fishing, camping, out on the trail and ran into grizzly bears, black bears, and even a couple polar bears. And this stuff was 98% effective for people walking away with no injuries. Literally 98% of them sprayed the bear and nobody had to go to hospital. There was a few cases where people got some minor scrapes and scratches. One guy fell over a log after the bear ran away. So it's a pretty highly effective product. What happens to the bear? Why does this work so well? And it works so well because it has really, really hot peppers in it. And that capsicum causes extreme inflammation. It causes involuntary eye closure, coughing, and burning sensation to the skin. And it lasts for about 10 to 30 minutes on the bear. The bear goes from, I want to eat you, or I want to defend myself, or my cubs, or my food source, to self-preservation mode. And they are in so much pain. Just like Daryl said, like their olfactory nervous system is massive in comparison to human beings. I always call it their money maker. They need those noses, and they're now not understanding why they're in so much pain, and they want to get away from the thing that's causing them pain. So they'll often turn and run, or they'll drop to the ground and start trying to rub the bear spray off. I've seen some cases where they've looked really phased, where they look kind of in shock. They're like, what is happening to me right now? I don't know. And then that gives you some time, while keeping your bear spray in hand, to slowly back away and get out of the situation. I keep seeing cases since the study's been done, examples of people using bear spray effectively to either save their life or save the person that they're with, or they have someone in front of them that gets attacked by a bear, and then they pull out their bear spray and they use it to stop that person from continuing being mauled. The bear runs away and they save the person's life.
That was awesome, Kim. I'm going to throw in a plug. Another thing I really like about the bear spray, it teaches a bear. If a bear gets hit with bear spray 1 or 2 times, they learn not to go near people because it's going to hurt. Whereas opposed, a lot of people will talk about they want to carry their sidearm, which is fine. I'm not going to say they shouldn't, but that's a final choice. And a bear could be just doing a bluff charge, and then the bear's dead. And so there's no potential for learning with the other alternatives. So that's why bear spray it's like a win-win-win in almost every situation.
Absolutely agreed.
Okay. I will let you all ask a few more questions. What I'm going to do, though, is I've got some videos, and I'm going to warn you, because we tried playing some videos a couple weeks ago, and they, depending on the bandwidth and everything, sometimes they may come off being choppy. I tested them before today's class and they were running okay, but I don't know with this many people if it's going to cause an issue. But what I want to do is play a video or two, and I'm going to ask Tyler to kind of jump in to talk about some things. But what I'm going to do before I show the video, I'm going to describe it in case the video does not play on your end. And so let me call up a different screen really quickly. And so this video, let me pause it. A lot of people will probably have seen this video, but I believe this was up in Alaska. And what you're going to see is it's a brown bear and her cub walking down a path, and the gentleman filming is walking backwards because this mom and cub are approaching him. I'll play a little bit of it, and then I'm going to ask Tyler and even Kim to jump in to talk a little bit about what the best option or what should be done in this situation. So let me first try to play the video for folks.
I'm walking backwards on the trail back to the camp. I'm walking on the trail, and mom and 2 cubs. So I'm continuing to walk backwards. The mom and the cubs.
Okay, this video, believe it or not, goes on for a number of minutes where he keeps walking backwards and mom keeps walking towards him. Tyler, let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen this video before?
Yes, I have.
Okay, what would you recommend in this situation that this person does?
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, in comparison to some of the other videos that I have seen and some of the encounters that I've heard about, this individual did the right thing by backing up. What I typically will tell people is, if you have a bear like this that just seems to be using the trail, which it is, this bear isn't really posturing or giving any signs of defensive or offensive predatory behavior towards the person, but get off the trail, let that bear pass by, create more of a buffer between you and the bear. It's not always the most reasonable thing to be walking backwards like that while your attention is focused on what's in front of you. So just try to veer off the trail and create a little bit more distance between you and the bear. And obviously, talk to the bear in a calm voice, and he's kind of narrating the video. So that probably filled that void right there, in terms of just so that bear realizes that he's not a threat. I think he did a pretty good job. Yes,
I'm so glad you said that, because I was sent this video shortly after it came out, and for the most part, that's what we're advising. If the bear appears to be using a trail, you're probably just in their way. So if it's safe for you to kind of step off the trail and let the bear walk on by, like Tyler was saying, the bear wasn't showing much of an interest in them other than wanting to walk down the same trail he was walking. So, all right, I'm gonna show another video, which I don't know if too many people have seen this. Let me pause it, but let me set it up. So there is a mama grizzly and 2 of her cubs feeding out in this field. And there is a number of people where they're filming this. They're filming it at a distance, and all of a sudden an adult male or another large adult bear comes into play. I don't know if it's adult female or adult male, but the 2 adults begin to battle because mama bears don't like any other adults getting too close to their offspring. This becomes a really intense situation. Hopefully the video will play for everyone. If it doesn't, when I send the recording out to everyone, I'll include links to these videos so you can watch them in their entirety. But the problem with this situation is where the cubs run to. So then we'll talk about it. Hopefully you'll be able to see it. If not, we'll talk you through it.
Uh-oh. Hey. They're using us as protection. Yeah, it's okay. Hey, that's close enough. Hey, close enough. We go this way. No, don't move. It's close enough.
Okay, I don't know if Tyler, were you able to see that?
I wasn't able to see the latter half of it, but I was
Okay.
able to hear it and see.
Okay,
kind of
so what happened is when that adult grizzly got too close to the mama with cubs, the mom was defending and she focused her attention on the male grizzly, and the 2 cubs ran across the field and they almost like took cover behind these people filming. I will tell you, this would scare me because knowing mom is going to be amped up after dealing with the male grizzly and she comes looking for her cubs. I wish there was an ending to this video because I wanted to know what comes of it. And so have you ever had a situation, Tyler, where you got in between or too close to any offspring with a mama grizzly?
I can speak to one of my colleagues, and I was right there at the situation where this kind of thing happened. You've got, a family group, mom and 2 cubs wants to cross the road. Mom decides to cross, and then the 2 little ones decide, hey, we're gonna lag behind. And then unbeknownst to my colleague, he finds himself in between, mom on one side of the road and cubs on the other. And in a best case scenario, you have a vehicle to take cover. But then you've also got to think about the situation that you're in and what kind of cover foliage that you have to deal with, and whether or not you're actually going to be able to see those bears when they do come out. But it's definitely not a great situation to be in. He ended up getting bluff charged because he didn't have a vehicle. He didn't have anything to take shelter behind. And so he got bluff charged. Cubs finally crossed the road, but some of the signs mom was giving off that demonstrated that she was agitated. She was huffing, clacking her jaw, swaying back and forth, kind of just standing in the road. And the cubs just had no interest in trying to follow her because they were on a berry bush. But it does get tricky. And in my line of work with crowds, you've got to think about this quite a bit. We've had situations where courting activity, or a male and a female have been mating in an open flat, and then all of a sudden another bear comes in, scares off the female or the male, and that bear comes tearing towards the crowd. And so that's something that's always on the top of my mind when we have situations like that with people in close proximity.
Yeah, and I will say you are probably in the highest profile situation in all of North America when it comes to grizzlies and people encountering each other, with working in Yellowstone and both the Tetons, because they're world famous bears. And unfortunately, with social media, it just becomes a spectacle sometimes, with people wanting to see individual bears. And I feel for you, man. So Kim, do you have any close encounters with grizzlies? I will tell you, I don't. All of my bear encounters, although I've seen grizzlies, I've never had a really close encounter with a grizzly. Kim, do you have any stories you'd like to relate?
Yeah, for sure. I've had a few over the years working in the park and then out hiking on the trails. So I go, gosh, which one to tell? I think when we think about grizzly bears, we often go right to like, bear attacks and really scary stuff. And we forget that, every single day in bear country, people are walking on the trails and out camping, and they probably walk by bears and never have a clue that they're even there. And those bears, for the most part, are getting off the trail and getting out of our way, which is amazing. Because, if bears were so ferocious and so aggressive towards humans all the time, we'd have so many more people getting attacked, so many more people getting killed. And so, one of the greatest, nicest stories, I guess I'll tell this one, is I was hiking in Banff National Park up to Mount Helen. And on my way down the trail, I could hear bear bells down the trails. Oh, darn bear bells. They don't work. And I told my friend, I was like, Dr. Tom Smith did a study on bear bells and found them to not be an effective tool at deterring bears, that bears didn't really know what they were. So they didn't really react to it. And so we're hiking down the trail, and I said, my friend knows about bear safety, and we talk about importance of every couple of minutes as we're hiking, we're making noise, we're letting out hoops and hollers, letting bears know that we're coming. And that way, that gives them an opportunity to get off the trail if they happen to be on the trail. If they got cubs of them, they can usher them out of the way, let them know that we're not trying to sneak up on them, steal their food, kill their cubs. And so we come across these hikers with their bear bells, and we explain to them, as you're hiking, you really should be making noise. And so after that, they put their bear bells away and started doing that. And so we're coming down the trail and we're walking, and I'm going like, hey, bear, yo, bear. And I look out of the corner of my eye to the right, and about 12 feet away is this big puffy grizzly bear trying to hide behind the tiniest berry bush I've ever seen. It was so pathetic. I was like, you are the worst at hide and seek I have ever met. And I turned to my friend and I said, hey, there's a grizzly to the right. And she's like, whoa, 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 what do we do? I was like, it's okay. He's hiding. Keep walking. And we just kept walking. I pulled up my bear spray, pulled off the safety just in case something changed. But he literally thought that we couldn't see him, and we kept walking down the trail. And it's because we were making noise. We let that bear know we were coming. We gave them an opportunity to get out of the way and understand what our intentions were as we were in nature. So I wanted to share that one first.
No, that's awesome. And I'm not afraid to tell folks that when I my first job, I was working in East Tennessee with the Appalachian Bear Center. And so I was working with black bears, and I was fairly fresh out of college, and my knees were shaking. It's like, I'm doing what? And the first couple of times it was like, what am I getting myself into? And I will tell you folks, the more you learn, the more you watch, the more you study these animals, the more you see their personality, and you can almost predict. I will never ever say you can always predict, but you can almost predict what they're going to do. And it brings this calm and comfort when you're so much more knowledgeable about that animal. And like Kim was just saying, she saw the bear's reaction assured her that the bear was not a threat to them, and they just kept walking, and that's what the bear wanted to do. And so I just encourage everyone to study and relax and learn about these animals. And the more you see them, the more comfortable you'll feel. Don't ever get too comfortable, but the more comfortable you'll feel when you're out in grizzly country. So what I want to do now, we're at the end. I will tell you the couple videos I had, I will send them to you when I have the recording. But what I want to do is, since I have Tyler and Kim here, I don't want to keep them up too late. But if anyone has any specific questions, especially about grizzly encounters or anything like that, please ask the questions now while we have them, and we'll try to address them. And then we will be wrapping up here after we answer all your questions. All right, I will read. I got to put my old man glasses on.
There's a good question there about bear bells I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, yeah, go. You go ahead while I start reading Trisha's question.
Okay, this one's for you, Evelyn. You said, I'm confused. Bells make noise, but don't use them. So that's a great question. So what Tom found, Dr. Tom Smith, he's out of Brigham Young University in Utah. He was up in Alaska doing another study. He put himself behind a blind, tied some fishing line to a bush a ways down next to a very common path that grizzly bears would go along to get down to the river to the spawning salmon. And he put the bear bells on there, and the bears couldn't see the bells, but they could hear them if they were walking by. And he hid in the blind to see how they would react. And he sat there all day ringing these darn bells, and every bear that walked by had zero reaction to the bells. And the question in his head was, well, why don't they respond to that sound? So he took out a pencil and he broke it in half. And immediately this female grizzly with 2 cubs looked directly where his blind was, stood up, and was alert and concerned. And the difference there is that the sound of a pencil breaking is very similar to the sound of a branch breaking. And what are bears listening for every day of their lives? They're listening for other carnivores. And what sounds do carnivores make? They sound like branches breaking, bushes moving, maybe some huffing and chuffing sounds, but certainly not the sound of bells. There is no animal that sounds like bells. So maybe birds, I guess. But and so basically bells made no difference to these animals. He tried the human voice. He made some noises of human voices that also disturbed the bears, and they looked around and were wondering what it was. So it's bear bells were invented by people, but we never thought to maybe test them to see if they were an effective tool. I don't recommend them. Put them on your Christmas tree, put them on a wreath, but bring your friends, bring your voice, and make noise often, especially if you travel quickly through the bush, if you're on a mountain bike, if you're running on the trail. You've got to make noise even more often because you've got to give these animals time to get out of your way. So there you go.
Okay, very good answer. I'm gonna respond to Trish first, and then Tyler, if you could respond to the question regarding the half marathon and the Tetons.
Sure.
But let me first, I got to read Trish's question because she asked about William Wade, who was a grizzly hunter in 1909, started studying the bears, and he documented, or he thought he documented, that one purposefully hid himself in large boulders, covered the entrance. It was very planned actions by those bears from what he observed. And so Trish's question is, what do you think? Are grizzlies that self-aware? And I will tell you, Trish, I think you hit it with your last sentence, where it is just fanciful musings. Now, I will tell you that oftentimes when people observe wild animals, they assign human traits, and they think that the animals are thinking like humans. And I'll give you a prime example. Have you ever heard where people will say coyotes will sometimes send a lure dog or a coyote to lure a dog or a pet away, and they purposefully send this animal in so that the pet then gives chase, and then they lure it back into an ambush, and the rest of the coyotes jump in. And it's just completely misinterpreted what they're seeing. And so they're trying to assign additional traits that probably aren't there. Animals, now don't get me wrong, grizzlies are intelligent animals, but I don't think they go as far as what you described or what William Wade described in 1909, where they were actually planning different things and doing above and beyond what they typically do. Bears being opportunistic, when they find food, they go for it. Whether or not they just jump on it or they eat it, whatever they do, they typically don't strategize on how to acquire their food. So I think it's more of fanciful musings. Sorry to disappoint you there, but Tyler, if you want to answer the question about the half marathon and the Tetons in June and how they do bear control for an event like that.
Yeah, sure. So I guess what bear control really looks like for an event like that is, the front country areas of the park are managed for people. The backcountry areas of Grand Teton are managed for the bears. And so meaning that bears in developed areas on the roadway, like actually using the road, are not tolerated. So for that kind of thing, most likely it would just be our wildlife staff, law enforcement. But really, if you're running a half marathon, I would strongly advise you to carry bear spray. However you wish to carry it. I know that there are a lot of folks that do that have done the half marathon in the past that wear scat belts. And so that's a really easy addition that doesn't weigh much. It's not bulky. It won't get in your way if you're running. But really for bear control, I don't want to say that we are sitting on our hands for an event like this, but certainly it's very difficult to tell where the bears are going to show up one day as opposed to next. They do travel considerable distances. I forget when the half marathon, it's in June. So typically in June, most of the grizzly bear activity in the park is going to be confined to the northern extent. So if you're going to draw a horizontal line where Signal Mountain is in Grand Teton, anything north of that is typically where your majority of the grizzly bear activity is going to be. Anything south of that's going to be black bear activity. However, most of the black bears are going to be sticking to the forest. So really for bear control, I don't anticipate, we've never really had a bear situation for the half marathon before. So hopefully we don't have one going into the future.
We have in Banff. I hope you don't either.
We had an incident in New Mexico a couple of years ago with a black bear at a half marathon, where the runner actually surprised the mama with cubs, and it turned out bad, unfortunately. There's a couple questions, Kim, that I think you could address. One is from Jan, says, can you express an incident where you deployed bear spray? And another one had a quick question about how long after bear spray is purchased does it stay pressurized? I think you answered that and you said 4 years.
4 years, yeah. After 4 years, it starts to depressurize. So expiry dates should be 4 years. I think a lot of the companies right now are doing 3 or 4 years, but I hope they adjust to that research. So we'll see.
Kim, do you want to tell a story where you deployed bear spray?
Sure. I, fortunately, after all the many encounters I've had over the years with black and grizzlies, I have never had to spray my bear spray. I have always talked or yelled my way out of those situations. And I've been very fortunate that way. I've been very close to having to spray. I was in an incident where I had a grizzly bear that approached me and refused to leave and then circled behind me. And my friend took out her can of bear spray and she sprayed me. So I don't know if that counts. And that wasn't so great for me. But even considering that I'd just been sprayed at close range in the face with bear spray, I knew that I had to deal with the bear in front of me. I kept yelling, making myself look big. My friend did as well. We both had our bear spray aimed at the bear, and luckily it did back away and leave. The reason why I didn't spray the bear right off the bat was I was on a cliff and the bear ended up climbing up the cliff next to us and then down climbing, where I thought that if I sprayed it with bear spray, it would fall on us. And we'd all end up in quite a mess. It was a horrible situation, but it worked out through communication. Thank goodness. We managed to bluff that bear into thinking we were either crazy, smelled bad, or were bigger, scarier bears. I'm not sure. But as far as actually spraying it, I have definitely met numerous people over the years who have had to use their bear spray. And my friend Dan actually was out with a group of people, and he decided to hike off by himself for a couple of minutes just to go look at something. And he wasn't making noise at the time, and he heard something large running towards him. and he tried to pull his bear spray out. Unfortunately, it was attached to his backpack on a carabiner. And because he was so scared, his small motor skills, of course, were not functioning. And he was unable to get the bear spray off of the carabiner. He eventually did get it off the carabiner, but not the safety off. So he couldn't spray his bear spray. The bear charged him, knocked him down. He fell down a cliff, down a hill, and he still had the can of bear spray in his hand as the bear ran, grizzly bear ran straight towards him. And he sprayed the entire can of bear spray in the bear's face at 1.5 feet and stopped the attack. That guy walked away with some scratches and a sprained ankle. So it works.
It works. And again, I want to stress these are extreme cases. 99% of your encounters are going to be wonderful encounters where you see the bear and the bear takes off the other way. But being prepared is paramount. Tyler, can you answer or address the question? Courtney asked, are bear canisters the only possibility for safe food storage in the backcountry? She's in Alaska and there's not many tall trees. So as far as food storage in backcountry, what do you recommend?
Oh, areas with no trees are difficult, obviously. Canisters are a pretty solid option. If you can't hang your food, as long as you keep it a safe distance away from your camp. And so when I say a safe distance, I'm referring to 100 yards or more. If you absolutely have to keep it on the ground, you can do so. I've been in backcountry scenarios where we've used bear canisters and there is absolutely zero possibility to hang your food. And so as long as you keep it a safe distance away from your camp, that'll keep the bears from, coming further into your camp for the interest in that canister. And then if they do, all seen probably videos of bears, trying to break open garbage cans or canisters. Honestly, most bears aren't going to spend the effort or the energy to getting what's inside if there's something more abundant on the landscape. And so if you've got, food inside of your canister, it'll probably give up after a short period of time. If you're in Yosemite, it's a little bit different. Bears in Yosemite there was one particular bear that learned that if he took bear canisters and threw them off a cliff, that they would break open at the bottom. And so that bear is no longer alive, died of natural causes, but that bear learned how to break open those canisters. And so they are bear resistant, not completely bear proof, but again, you can store it on the ground as long as it's a safe distance from your camp.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Jan asked a question and she addressed it to me. It says, what is recommended for food storage for day hikes and just taking snacks and lunch? And something like that, Jan, there's no possibility of you're going to carry food with you. If you're on a day hike, you're going to have food in your pack. The best thing when you're hiking, we always tell people, hike with other people. Hiking alone is not the best option, especially in grizzly country. And so when you're hiking alone, you're talking, you're making noise. Those bears don't want to be around people. I guarantee you they're going to smell any food, anything in your pack. But as long as you're making commotion, talking to other folks, they're not going to overcome their fear of humans to try to get those M&Ms. The key here, though, is keeping a clean camp. Don't leave food or scraps behind, because that is what's going to lead to bears that become habituated or food conditioned, that know that they can get food from hikers. So it's paramount for hikers to do their part to make sure that bears do not become food conditioned. But if it's a wild bear that has never received a scrap of food from humans, that temptation won't be there. If you're making noise and talking to the folks that you're with, they're not gonna bother you, even though you might have a ham sandwich in your backpack. And then Lynn asked a question, Lynn Levesque from Canada. So Kim, you're not the only Canadian here. Did you see the video of the bear following a skier down the mountain in Europe? What exactly was going on there? Defensive, offensive? It was a weird video. If you haven't seen it, the skier wasn't too panicked, but the bear was galloping behind. Obviously, there is this chase instinct, But from that video alone, it did not look like that bear was serious, because you have to understand bears can run faster than a racehorse. And so when they go in a full-on sprint, there's not much that's going to outrun a bear. But the bear was more curious. It saw this fast-moving object and kind of pursued it. A lot of predators, whether or not it's bears or cats or wolves, when there is a potential prey source that is moving by quickly, they automatically will just give chase to see what's going on, because their brain doesn't process it fast enough to understand, hey, this is a human, this is out of my realm of things that I should be eating. So it's just typical chase behavior. And I don't believe the bear followed the skier all the way down the hill, but that's what I thought was going on. It did not seem all that aggressive in nature. So I think it was more of a curiosity chase than anything. Evelyn asked if I'll have a class on coyotes. I've done classes on coyotes. I don't have one scheduled, but we'll consider it. Is there a difference between life expectancy between black and brown bears? Tyler, do you know offhand what a quick answer to that would be?
Yeah, so with grizzlies, and I can only speak to the greater Yellowstone area because it might be different elsewhere, but 20 to 30 years is typically the life expectancy for our bears here. Typically the females are outliving the males, and that's just because they engage in less risky behaviors. And so you think about the males and they fight constantly, and you'll see some of these really scarred up bears, and that's a result of that. Oldest bear that we've had here in this ecosystem was 34 years old. And that bear unfortunately was removed just recently. And it was because the bear, its dentition, so its dental health had deteriorated to a point where it was going for easy kills on livestock. So it got into a cattle calving operation and was basically just breaking the necks of these young cows because it didn't have teeth. And so 34 is the oldest, but typically it's 20 to 30 years.
Awesome. Okay, Trish asked another question, and it's a great question. I'm going to answer the first part, and I'm going to actually ask Tyler to chime in too. But Trish asked, are wildlife corridor projects for bears too? I often see videos or articles that highlight ungulates using these corridors. Can bears benefit from them by avoiding human contact? Awesome question. It is this whole concept of wildlife corridors is growing and growing in momentum, because they're learning more and more about the movements and migrations of these ungulates. When I mean ungulates, I mean hoofed animals like deer and elk and pronghorn and moose. They travel great distances, and because of the development of the land by humans, sometimes we interrupt those migration routes with either fences or roads or just urban development. And so we're beginning now to understand that it's very important that these animals can move freely across the landscape. So we're trying to improve their movements by creating easier paths for them to travel, whether or not it's overpasses or underpasses. Canada by far is way ahead of the US when it comes to these travel corridors. Banff is the primary example. But I will say, Trish, it is a key thing. There are some, if you're looking at the grizzly population in the greater Yellowstone area, and that whole part of Montana, Idaho, even eastern Washington and Wyoming, there are some grizzly populations that they're trying to link up. And unfortunately, there's some development in there. So trying to create these corridors so grizzlies can move freely from one mountain range to another is a big part of what we're looking at. So bears absolutely are in the equation when we're trying to figure out and protect these migration routes. Is there anything you wanted to add, Tyler, regarding that question?
Sure. I guess one of the things is, and from all of us that are in this field, it's interesting some of the contention surrounding some of these wildlife corridor projects. I know across the range, my neighbor here, Idaho, unfortunately, Fremont County really is not on board for wildlife corridor projects. And a lot of the reason has to do with where the funding's coming from. So whether it's federal or state funding, and then local constituents or the populace feels like, sometimes the feds are stepping on their toes and getting into something that should be a state concern. But in terms of some of the ungulate corridor I've seen, so if you ever go to Colorado, drive, into Colorado from Wyoming, there are overpasses for elk. And so some of these, wildlife land bridges or overpasses, whatever you'd want to call them, the bears would use them just like, if you funnel them into an area, they would use them, just as much as any other species. I think in the park, what I've seen more often is black bears using culverts. And so we've had black bears that use the culvert system to get all over the campgrounds. We've had black bears use culverts to, instead of crossing over top of the road, go underneath. And so some of these corridors may not be actually constructed for the purpose of allowing wildlife, but they are, multi-use or multi-purpose structures. So like, culverts going under the road, et cetera. But yeah, it's interesting. I-90 is the major, major highway that really fragments that northern continental divide. So that the Glacier National Park bears from Yellowstone, and even some of the other populations. I-90 serves as that fragmentation area.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay. It has been an hour and 45 minutes. I'm going to answer one last question and then we're going to wrap up here. Steve Ellis wrote about some folks say last resort to sleep on top of their food when there's no alternative. I think it's nuts. Well, Steve, I think it's nuts too. I would never say that you should ever try that, especially in Grizzly Country. You want to make sure, even if you lose the food during the night to whatever animal, you don't want that food anywhere near your camp where you're sleeping. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to thank everyone. I'm going to wrap this presentation up and let you know this is the end. This has been very enjoyable for myself, and I hope you guys learned a whole bunch. I want to thank Tyler and Kim, and even though Stephanie's not here anymore, thank those three folks for joining us to help answer questions. I really do appreciate. I also got to give total credit to a number of photographers that shared their grizzly photos with me. Ashley Haskett and Bob Howdeshell, you guys are fantastic. If you don't know, we do have a website that we're going to overhaul soon, but you can go to Wildlife for You to learn more about this program and some of the upcoming classes. We also have a podcast that we've done. We've got 60 some episodes in the bank. We're still making them. It's myself and Stephanie do this podcast. So by all means, look that up and listen to it. I think you'll learn some more there. But the best way to stay on top of all these classes is follow us on Facebook. We're constantly providing updates, what classes are coming up and how to register. And mark your calendars, folks. If you're not already registered, 2 weeks from today, we do these classes on the first Tuesday and the third Tuesday of every month. But 2 weeks from today, on February 15th, I'll be teaching the class. It's going to be about gray wolves and how they're icons for wild America. You'll learn everything you want to know about gray wolves. Probably won't go the full hour and 45 minutes, but I hope you join me for that class. So with that, I'm going to thank you so very much for your participation and for your wonderful class questions today. And once again, I do thank you, Kim and Tyler, for joining us tonight and helping me answer the questions. So any last words?
Thanks so much for having us. This was great.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daryl. I really appreciate it.
I thank you so much, and I'll be in touch with both of you guys, but I'll let you get to bed. I know that, well, you guys aren't so bad. My East Coasters, it's going on 10 o'clock at night, so I better start wrapping this up. But thanks again for everything, and we'll see you at the next talk, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.